stop whatever you're doing for a moment, because what I'm about to tell you completely flips the narrative you've been hearing all week. Belgius. What Russia believed was happening in Ukraine was not happening at all, not even close, bound, because while Russian commanders thought Ukrainian forces were retreating, celebrating what looked like another hard-won victory, they were actually walking straight into a carefully prepared trap. And by the time they realized it, it was already too late. It's like, this is the real story of the last 5 days of the Ukraine-Russia war, a story Moscow does not want you to hear. Let's zoom out first and understand where things stand. As of mid-December, arts handling Arterseith. Russia controls roughly 30% of Ukrainian territory, about square kilometers, an area roughly the size of Ohio. Throughout Arsene Arterseith, Russian forces have continued grinding forward, especially in eastern Ukraine, gaining just over square kilometers in an entire year. On paper, that sounds like momentum. In reality, it came at a cost so staggering it would terrify any military planner. The Ukraine's commander-in-chief reported that approximately Russian soldiers were killed or wounded in Arsene Arterseith alone. British defense estimates put total Russian casualties since the invasion began at over 1 million. That's not a winning strategy. That's attrition on an industrial scale. And yet despite those losses, the Kremlin has continued pushing the narrative that Russia is slowly but surely winning. Then came Kursk back in August. Arsene Arterseith. Ukrainian forces did something that stunned the world. They crossed into Russian territory and seized land inside Kursk Oblast. It was bold, unprecedented, and deeply embarrassing for Moscow. By the end of the first week, Ukraine claimed control over roughly square kilometers and dozens of settlements. Putin was furious. He reportedly issued deadline after deadline to push Ukrainian troops out, first by October, then by January. Passed without success. By November, Russian forces had managed to retake about half of that territory, but only with outside help. Around North Korean troops were deployed to the region, marking the first time foreign soldiers had fought on European soil for Russia. That alone told us something important. Russia was running out of options. Now fast forward to last week. Between December, Sursan, Russian forces announced they had recaptured several villages inside the Kursk salient. State media celebrated. Military bloggers declared that Ukraine was finally retreating, but that's not what was actually happening. What looked like a Ukrainian withdrawal was a deliberate repositioning. Ukrainian units pulled back from exposed positions, drawing Russian forces forward, stretching their supply lines, and funneling them into prepared defensive zones. In a single day, Ukrainian defenders stopped. Were separate Russian attacks. 15. This wasn't collapse. It was controlled deception. Russia thought it was chasing a retreat. Instead, it walked straight into a kill zone. While most attention was focused on the ground fighting, Ukraine was also reshaping the war in another domain, the sea. Despite having much of its navy destroyed early in the invasion, Ukraine has completely transformed the Black Sea battlefield using domestically produced naval drones. These small, unmanned, explosive boats have proven devastatingly effective. In Arsene Arterseith alone, Ukrainian forces destroyed 5 Russian warships and hundreds of other vessels. The Russian Black Sea Fleet, once a symbol of regional dominance, has been forced to pull most of its ships out of occupied Crimea and relocate them to ports on Russia's mainland. Think about that for a moment. Ukraine didn't defeat Russia's navy with a larger fleet. It did it with innovation. Just days ago, Ukrainian naval drones reportedly struck a Russian oil tanker believed to be part of what analysts describe as a shadow fleet, commercial vessels often associated with efforts to bypass international restrictions. According to available reports, the tanker was operating with limited identification data when it was damaged, raising fresh concerns about maritime security in the region. And as a result, Russian naval activity near parts of its coastline has become noticeably more cautious. That is not a picture of confidence. And then attention shifted to Moscow. On the night of December 1st, Russian authorities reported a large-scale drone incident involving multiple unmanned aerial vehicles approaching the capital region. Not on the outskirts, not nearby, but directed toward Moscow itself. Band officials stated that air defense systems intercepted many of these drones across several regions. Explosions were reported in areas west of the capital. Temporary airport closures were announced, and air defense activity continued through the night. Lenja, it marked the second such incident affecting the Moscow region within a single week, and that is the larger point. For many Russian civilians, this was a rare moment when the realities of a distant war appeared to move closer to home, a reminder of what Ukrainian cities have experienced repeatedly over the past 3 years. And at the same time, Ukraine has continued a broader campaign targeting key elements of Russia's economic infrastructure, including energy facilities, fuel storage sites, and industrial assets. Analysts suggest these strikes are intended to apply economic pressure rather than achieve immediate battlefield gains. Almagy Ukrainian sources estimate the financial impact of this campaign to be significant, with damage costs far exceeding the resources used to carry out the attacks. This conflict increasingly is being fought not only on the battlefield, but through economic and logistical pressure. Balling in late November, the strategic environment shifted further. LMND, the United States, reportedly adjusted its policy regarding Ukraine's use of certain long-range weapons. Soon after, Ukrainian forces acknowledged strikes on military-related targets inside Russian territory. British-supplied systems were also reportedly used against facilities linked to command and coordination functions. Moscow's response followed a familiar pattern. Woodins were issued, strategic doctrines were referenced, nuclear rhetoric returned to public statements. This cycle has repeated itself throughout the conflict. Russia issues warnings, Western support continues, Ukraine adapts its capabilities, losses occur, and the warnings return again. 1. Despite the intensity of the language used, most analysts agree that actual escalation beyond conventional warfare would carry severe consequences for all sides, including Russia. As a result, the rhetoric has increasingly lost its impact. Behind every strategic calculation, however, lies a profound human cost. Ukrainian officials estimate that tens of thousands of soldiers have been killed since the invasion began, with many more wounded. Civilian casualties number in the thousands, and millions of people have been displaced from their homes. Large portions of Ukraine's energy infrastructure have been damaged, creating serious challenges as winter sets in. These figures represent more than data points. They represent families, communities, lives disrupted, and yet despite these losses, Ukraine continues to resist, not out of desire for continued conflict, but from an understanding shaped by experience. Previous agreements failed to prevent renewed aggression. Arsenling Ishur marked one escalation. Arsenling Arshur marked another. Ol NDO, without credible security guarantees, many fear history could repeat itself. Lingus. So when claims circulate that the outcome of the war is already decided, it's worth looking beyond simplified narratives. Yes, territory has changed hands, but at immense cost. Yes, operations continue, but under growing economic and logistical strain. Yes, confidence is projected even as naval activity contracts, infrastructure is targeted, and air defenses are repeatedly activated near major cities. And when Russian forces believed Ukrainian units were disengaging in parts of the Kursk region, when events suggested a different reality. Not a collapse, but a recalibration, a reflection of adaptation, endurance, and long-term strategy. Russia entered this conflict expecting a rapid outcome. Nearly 3 years later, it faces a prolonged struggle marked by uncertainty, pressure, and unresolved consequences. One conclusion from recent events is difficult to ignore. Ukraine is still operating. Ukraine is still adapting, and Ukraine remains committed to its defense. This war is ongoing, and understanding it accurately matters.